So they are disturbed that Krishna's feet may be pricked by the prickles, but actually it's describing in Gurudev's, I think it's Venu Gita or Gopi Gita, how Mother Earth, she actually puts her tongue out. So Krishna's walking on the very soft texture of Mother Earth's tongue, so he doesn't feel any pricks from the ground. So now we in this village, yesterday I described Nanda Baba and all the Brijbasis in their huge caravan. They crossed over the Jamuna and they've reached, they spent some time what we call Vrindavan today. This village of Vrindavan wasn't present at all at that time in the way. It was all part of the forest. And I described the nature of the Vrindavan forest as being very long, because the top of the Vrindavan forest is just behind Giriraj Govardhan, where today it crosses over into Rajasthan, Dig and Adibadri. That's the extent of the Vrindavan forest. And then on the sides, I was describing how there's, on the left-hand side, as you look at, there's Bahulavan, Talvan, Madhuvan, and then there's Kamudvan just above that. And then we have Vrindavan, and then above Varshana and Nandagaon today, we have Kamyavan and Kadirvan. These 7 forests are there. So when they crossed over, and then they spent some time in Chhattisgarh, I described, and then that circle of wagons, and then they proceeded to Rao, where we see today that little village, and then Bashant. And it's from Bashant that Krishna first took the calves out grazing. And now we come to this pastime. This is still in the 11th chapter. In the 11th chapter, there's a number of demons described. The title of the chapter is Krishna's childhood pastimes. And then the next chapter after this is Agasura. So that's the sequence through the chapters of the Bhagavatam. And Shukadeva Goswami at this point is describing these are very confidential pastimes, in fact. And when we consider the reason for that confidentiality is because if we told these types of pastimes to non-devotees, they would just look at us in complete, like, have you lost something up there or something? You're thinking that God, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is crawling around on his hands and knees and crying for butter, stealing butter, doing all these naughty things. So these are considered extremely confidential pastimes. They don't broach our sacred morality, which is why when we get past the 21st chapter of Venu Gita, then it gets into an even more deeper confidentiality, because then our sort of conditioned idea of what is morality, etc., gets really challenged. That we have to accept that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is having relationships with other men's wives. So then it takes on a much deeper, more confidential appreciation. But at this stage, we can absorb these sweet pastimes, but whether a non-devotee, how can he appreciate this? So therefore, they're of a very confidential nature. So when Krishna is in that area, that village of Basant, and I described yesterday, if you're familiar with the road from Chhattisgarh to Rao, so then there's a little village called Basant, and in that village of Basant, you actually catch the atmosphere of Giriraj Govardhan. You're in another place. You can sense it. Even a mundane person, if they're told about it, they can sense that distinction in consciousness, because what radiates out of Giriraj Govardhan is very potent indeed. So now the Brijbasis are beginning to circumambulate Giriraj Govardhan. They're only going to go as far as Varshana and Nandagaon, where they're going to again take up their original ancestral homes, because originally Parjanya, Nanda Baba's father, is coming from Nandagaon. He performed his tapasya to get his 5 sons in that place, Ashisheshwara Mahadev. Yes, this place is actually where Parjanya is described as begging for the boon, performing austerities to receive a son. And then he was told by a celestial voice, actually you'll have 5 sons, and the middle son will be the most famous. It's very wonderful to consider the relationship between these 5 sons, because when Parjanya was passing over the mantle of who would be the king of Braj. Braj includes all of these forests. So this is the territory or the kingdom of that king of Braj. So Parjanya had the reins of that. He was the mahant of all those forests. So Parjanya, he naturally handed over to his eldest son, who is Upananda. But Upananda said, actually no, my dear father, I think Nanda Baba is far more qualified to actually take the head of the family. And this is such a beautiful consideration, because in most families they're all jockeying to be the number one. But in Krishna's family, they're so sweet and respectful to each other, they acknowledge the qualities of each other very beautifully. So, and Abhinanda, who's the second son, he also agrees with Upananda straight away. He said, yes, that Nanda Baba, he should actually be in charge. So then Nanda Baba is elected by his brothers, very favorably, very beautifully, very respectfully, that he's installed as a king of Braj. I thought when I read this is so beautiful arrangement that Krishna manages in his family relationships. So now they're coming around Govardhan, and they're going to go around Pucheri at the bottom and then Jetipur at the top, and then when they reach the place where they were many years before, because Parjanya left because of fear of the Keshi demon. This is what's described, that the Keshi demon was rampant even then. And Parjanya, he left because of fear of that demon. Keshi demon was an enormous demon. So they went to Mahavan, across the Jamuna. And it's there that Sri Radha takes birth in Ravel. And Krishna performs his pastime of eating dirt at Brahmand Ghat, etc. All these pastimes are on the other side of Jamuna. So just trying to fill in the geography here, because if we have the geography, we're talking about all Krishna's pastimes, and they're inconceivable, because this particular pastime of taking the cows out, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes the number of Krishna's calves is 1 followed by 17 zeros. So don't even try to calculate it. It's so achintya bhav mood. And it's saying in the commentary that, of course, there are no obstacles to that at all. Krishna can manifest his Dham any size that he chooses to, or contract it to be any size he chooses to. So this is the number of cows. So imagine how many cows there are, because you've obviously got to have 2 cows to make 1 calf. So then, the number of cows on top of that. What to speak of the residents themselves? It's described in the chapter of the Rasa Leela. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is describing there are 300 million gopis dancing, in that Rasa Leela pastime. And if you consider they've all got brothers probably, they've got a mother and a father, you're looking at more than 1 billion people in the little village of Braj. So we see, the enormity of this splendid, beautiful pastime that Krishna is manifesting. It's so, exceptional.
300 million, that's in Prakrat Leela, right? That's in the manifest pastimes,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
100 quadrillion calves.
Is that 17 zeros?
17 zeros.
Kishori has told us.
How many? 100 quadrillion.
A lot of calves. So, what I'm saying is, get this geographical picture, because they need a lot of grass. They need a lot of grazing. So this is the dynamic of Nanda Baba's village, is that they're always moving around, looking for newer and fresher pastures for all of these
100
quadrillion cows and calves. So they're proceeding around Govardhan now. And Krishna, he's demonstrated his heroism in defeating Bakasura. But I was considering this morning that usually when we worship one hero, we kind of set him apart as someone greater than us. But even though Krishna demonstrates these remarkable heroic acts, like today we'll talk about Bakasura, the cowherd boys, his dear friends, they never see him as someone distant. Even though they see him as the greatest hero, he is their most intimate friend because they're aware so deeply of his love for them. I've said many, many times that it's said in the Govinda Lilamrita how when they're being dressed in the morning, the cowherd boys by their mothers, they're saying, "Quickly, dress me quickly. Krishna's hungry to see me. He's dying to see me. Krishna's dying to see me." This is how they're feeling. They're aware of that affection from Krishna. This is the dynamic of Braj. This is what is melting all the Brijbasis. The Brijbasis already have this, unbelievable affection for Krishna in Madhurya. But what Krishna, the way Krishna reciprocates with them, it's constantly, because it has to be ever fresh. Otherwise, the dynamic of love is not really a reality, so to speak. It has to be growing. It has to be moving forward. Just like in our sadhan bhajan, in our bhakti, it has to be going forward. Otherwise, we start tearing our hair out. Oh my God, what's happened? I'm not moving in my bhajan. I'm just the same as I was a week ago. Nothing new is happening. Why can't I get some inspiration? We start feeling restless for that. Because that dynamic of continual increasing sweetness and appreciation for Krishna's affection for us and our own ability to engender and be inspired towards a greater and greater and greater attraction to him. Ratira Atman Yatobhavet. Lord Brahma is saying this after he studied the 4 scriptures, and he came to the conclusion through all the scriptures that this attraction to Krishna is the principal conclusion of all the scriptures. I was even thinking about Srila Gurudev in this regard, because many times I heard Gurudev inquire from other people, but I think one particular devotee, he would say, even though they were not following very carefully, even though they were not able to chant perhaps so much, but they had attraction for Gurudev. And Gurudev would consider this the principal point about that particular sadhak. If that sadhak was performing so much sadhan, so many rounds, doing so much seva, if they didn't have that attraction to Gurudev, it wasn't really, the equation wasn't really going to pan out. But if they had, and I heard Gurudev say on a number of occasions, commenting about someone, that somebody would come and complain about somebody, and Gurudev would say, but he has attraction for me. And that was the bottom line. That's the bottom line. If we actually have attraction for that personality, then he has the capacity to actually transport us into the highest stage of consciousness. It's that attraction. So similarly with Krishna, that attraction to Krishna, if we can engender that sweet attraction. So when the cowherd boys are coming around from Vasant, and Krishna loved this traveling pastime because he could be much more free. When they're actually living in the village life, there's a little bit more boundaries, but when they're actually doing the traveling, Krishna is so much freer to roam where he likes amongst all the carts, etc. And steal the butter and so many things like this. He has more freedom traveling. He loves to travel. And so they're traveling, they're taking the calves out. And it's described that they come to this reservoir of water. And Srila Jiva Goswami describes that this demon, Bakasura, was so tall that his beak, when it was open, was reaching towards Swarga. I was trying to figure out how many miles is, because we heard that Putana was 12 miles high. And I was just looking on Google today to see how high Mount Everest was, and it's 5.5 miles. So we can imagine how big is Putana. She's like double the height of Mount Everest. What to speak of Bakasura, who is Putana's brother. They're like a family of demons. I mean, they have good association amongst themselves, sharpening their blades of demonic mentality. So Bakasura wants to kill Krishna and offer Krishna in the pin ceremony to appease the departure of his darling sister Putana. But if Putana was 12 miles high and Bakasura's beak reaches Swagala, but I don't know. Maybe we have an astrologer here. He can tell us how far.
Let's just say he'd be much heavier than the earth.
Heavier than the earth.
Much. Swarga is very, very far.
It's a state of consciousness, though, Swaga. Also.
That also.
So it may not be so many miles, but anyway, that's how he's describing in his poetic language. Bakasura was very big. We accept that
Half the Milky Way, approximately. That's from my memory.
towards the Milky Way.
Half the Milky Way is about the height of Swarga, approximately.
Well, it's hard to conceive. I mean, as conditioned souls, we like to get the picture also. This is why I'm making effort to sort of describe the geography. Because today we can roam around in Braj Mandal and we can see all these different places and we can sort of put them into some kind of perspective. But simultaneously appreciate the achintya bhav consideration that it's all, beyond our conditioned ability to really comprehend the extent of this. So the cowherd boys are seeing this ginormous Bakasura, and it's described in the Bhagavatam like a mountain. But Jiva Goswami describes it even bigger than that. But like a mountain, and they became quite intimidated by the size. They could see it was alive, and fearsome. It didn't have a friendly vibe to it. But, they became a little bit intimidated. Then almost immediately, they became fearless because Krishna was with them. Their faith in Krishna is so beautifully demonstrated in occasions like this. Normal little boys would run away from a fearful situation, but they were feeling, no, we have Krishna and Krishna can defeat. They had cowherd boys, there are Vijay and different cowherd boys that are described can defeat the demigods in any sort of battle. So they had a lot of fearless, strong sakas. Nevertheless, Bakasura was an intimidating demon. And he immediately reached down and swallowed Krishna. And it's described that the cowherd boys, they just all of them fainted, including Baladev, who could have defeated this demon in a second, but Baladev was so absorbed in a mood of being a cowherd boy that he also fainted in great distress that Krishna had been swallowed. And at this time it's described that Krishna, his soft little body, made himself so hot like a red iron that he got caught in the throat of Bakasura, and he immediately vomited Krishna out. And Krishna came out, and then Bakasura was trying to peck at him, and Krishna was dancing around avoiding it like this. And then eventually Krishna just became impatient with him and grabbed the two ends of his beak. Now I don't know how to describe the size of the beak in relationship to Krishna's body that doesn't expand at this point. I think he's just reduced a bit for the Leela.
Simultaneously little and big.
Yes. Only the devotees can reconcile these things.
Maybe the beak was pointy.
Huh?
Maybe the beak was pointy.
It was. And I've often thought that as he opened it, he must have walked up the beak with his feet to keep on pushing it higher and higher so that it would bifurcate actually in the end and split his whole body. Because this must be how he actually performed that remarkable pastime. But then after Bakasura had been slain, then Krishna glanced at the cowherd boys and they immediately revived and they saw Bakasura completely smashed and devastated, killed. And they were so proud of Krishna. They glorified joyously, a celebration. And the demigods who had feared Bakasura even began to rain beautiful flowers down. Now it's described after this pastime, when they come back into the village settlement of Braj, that the cowherd boys, they begin to glorify Krishna's killing of Bakasura and Vatsasura. Because by now Krishna had developed the confidence that he was going to go out with the calves anyway. But actually, because he's very afraid of his mother. If his mother tells him not to do something, he really has to go, work out how they're going to get out of following mother's order. They're so respectful. There's many instances actually where it comes up demonstrating Krishna's enormous respect for Nanda Baba. Like when he goes to rescue him from Varunadev, and he comes in and he very carefully touches Nanda Baba's feet, and the relationship is described as being so respectful. He always had. This is the relationship, the ideal relationship between a son and a father is the most profound respect. So this is the highest Vatsalya mood that we're hearing about. So this respectful behavior towards Nanda Baba is so deep in Krishna's heart and his mother, but he's afraid sometimes of his mother. When his mother calls him, he doesn't want to go, etc. He's nervous about that. So, but when they come in now, all the cowherd boys, they can narrate the pastimes of Bakasura and Vatsasura. And Mother Yashoda, it's sort of like Krishna's gone out of her control now. Now it's already established. He's been taking the calves out for quite a few days now. She's not suddenly, she can't anymore say, no, you can't take the calves out, even though these demons are described as being so fearsome. So, it's described in the Krishna Samhita that also I didn't mention that this is still in Kumara Leela. This is still in Krishna's Balya age. So this is the 11th chapter I described in the Bhagavatam, and it's titled Krishna's Childhood Pastimes. And the next chapter is Aghasura, and Krishna is on the cusp of his Poganda age. He's an old 5-year-old. Because when he goes into the Brahma Vimohan Leela, he's right in his Poganda age at that time of the Brahma Vimohan Leela. But he's just on the cusp with the Agasura. But in this pastime, he's still quite Kumara, he's quite Balya. It's described, his physiognomy, what the size of his feet, his waist, etc. All his bodily features are described very clearly by the acharyas. He's still a little child. He's still, insisting that he dress himself and he not be too much mollycoddled, He still has to go. When he's in Poganda, no one even approaches him to dress him that way, and Mother Yashoda doesn't even attempt to actually pick him up that way. But it's described in this Krishna Samhita by Bhaktivinoda Thakur that Bakasura represents duplicity and cunning, deceptive behavior and hypocrisy, the outward manifestations of a false lifestyle, of cheating activities. Very insidious type of qualities Bakasura had. So when we can say that Krishna annihilating these various demons is like purifying our various anarthas, but as I said a number of times, Gurudev never really encouraged us to speak so much on this aspect of the childhood pastimes. He was so engrossed in the sweetness of Krishna, his consciousness just wanted to remain there. Nevertheless, we can mention Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's descriptions. It's also described in the Brahma Vivart Purana that in his last life he was Suhotra, a Gandharva disciple of Durvasa Muni, and along with his 3 brothers, Pralamba and Keshi demon, and not his sister in this pastime, they performed austerities at Pushkar Tirtha. And the 3 of them were picking lotuses at Chitra Sarova to offer to Krishna. And then they were arrested by the servants of Lord Shiva. And Shivji received them nicely, but he told them that he had promised that he'd spoken to Parvati, and he'd promised that anyone who picked these lotuses would be cursed by him. because there were only 100,000 lotuses. And Parvati was performing a particular brat that required 100 lotuses a day for 1,000 lotuses a day for 100 days. So therefore they were all calculated. And these three personalities had, perhaps unknowingly, picked some of these lotuses. Therefore, they were cursed to appear as demons. It doesn't seem like a heavy offense that they actually committed, but we see how they developed in that demoniac body with more than likely so much demonic association. They were taken out of their previous association. Putana was their sister. And what does she represent? False guru. So in that dark association, all these demonic mentalities flourished. So this is how the qualities of Bakasura are described. Then it's describing how Krishna performed all these pastimes to nourish Sakya, Vatsalya and Madhurya moods, as we've described. All of these pastimes have a purpose to them. They're to heighten the sweetness of the Brijvasis' affection towards Krishna. It just creates such a dynamic scene in the village of Braj, and creates such a special... When there's some danger present, it heightens, just like the gopis' relationship with Krishna. They're thinking that they have husbands, so that parakiya relationship is higher than that swakiya, because they have some understanding, that actually perhaps they shouldn't be here, because it's some transgression, and by that it creates a catalyst of a sweeter exchange. So now we come to the Aghasura pastimes. And here, in this chapter 12, it's described extensively the frivolity of the children of Krishna and his sakas when they would go to the forest. And we see today how children, they live in a world of play. Children want to play all the time. That's their nature, is to play. They almost live in another reality of play. Everything is play. It's only as they get a little bit older with some sort of responsibility, they're not allowed to play anymore. But their nature is playful. So Krishna exhibits this when he goes to the forest. And it's described how they would imitate but so many pastimes of their playful activities are described. They would imitate the birds. They would chase the shadows of the birds. Like the bird often flies in they would try to follow the pattern of the bird's shadow on the ground. And all the other boys would be cheering, yes, look, he's doing it right. Sometimes it's described they would sit very quietly with the ducks and then suddenly start splashing them. And sometimes they would sit with the monkeys and just pretend to be like a monkey and try to, move into their circle. And then, of course, stealing each other's lunch bags. Very personal exchanges. They would, steal a lunch bag, and then some body would take their samosa out and then refill it with some jasmine flowers or something, and then that saka would get his bag back finally. Often it's described that the saka would start to cry. They were only little boys. They were only just like 5 years old. They weren't even 6 years old. And if one little saka was feeling, they're all ganging up on me, he would just start to cry. And then Krishna immediately would get the lunch bag back and give it to that saka and pacify him. And then that saka would look at it, and then later on they'd take the samosa, and of course it was filled with flowers, and then everyone was laughing about this. So these incredibly sweet pastimes. And they had their flutes and their horns and their bugles, and they were constantly making beautiful music. They were constantly singing songs. who knows the elevated quality of these personalities and their ability to sing the most incredible ragas, like the gopis are described in the Rasa Leela, how all those ragas manifest. But they had tremendous ability to sing sweetly. And Krishna would love it. It's such like a high cultured picture that we're getting of Krishna and his sakhas. They were so qualified. And then it's described how they would imitate the peacocks. They would jump like the frogs. And they would even go into these big caves and hear the echo of their voices. Just 100 different childhood games, just constantly. And of course, sometimes they would neglect the cows in their enthusiasm, their calves rather, in their enthusiasm for their games. But now, at one point, on this particular day, it's described how Krishna decided to take a picnic in the forest, and they all brought all their prasadam with them. And then it's described the number of calves, etc. And the Bhagavatam itself is describing that Jnanis can't even approach this kind of mood towards Krishna. With their extensive jnana, they've dried up that speciality of excited sweetness, you can say, in relationship to Krishna, in his service to Krishna. And the yogis also, even though they perform so many austerities, they can't reach this sweetness of Krishna. It's such a rare thing to even be able to talk about it. What to speak of be on that path. And as we've said many times, we are so blessed with Srila Gurudev's mercy that we have the stamp of approval to go in there. Our passports are stamped. We're allowed to enter into these subject topics because we have our guardian who has taken us there. So we're very incredibly fortunate, to very simply enter into these sweetest, most confidential pastimes. So then, it's describing that the demigods, even though they drank nectar daily, were actually quite afraid of this Aghasura demon. This Aghasura demon was really horrendous. He was in the body of a snake. And being in the body of a snake is not a very joyful condition. So when Agasura was seeing the absolute frivolity and total blissful, joyful pastimes of the cowherd boys, he became extremely envious, like a snake. Why can't I enjoy? I can never enjoy like that. All I can do is try and disrupt it. So the enviousness, the quality of a snake, actually manifested in his determination to actually kill Krishna. And he thought, by killing Krishna, I'm going to take the lives of all the Brijbasis away because they can't live without Krishna. He was aware of this. And this is how it's described. And then, so he took the form of a python, which was 8 miles long. And I was thinking, where is 8 miles? It's practically from Vrindavan to Mathura. I think is a... Sorry? Yes, the parikrama of Vrindavan is 7 or 8 miles. So that's how big Aghasura was. And it's described that his open mouth was touching the clouds. And then he put out his huge tongue. And the cowherd boys, they immediately saw this phenomena. And they thought, first of all, is that a snake? Because he had some fishy smell coming out of his mouth. And then they thought, perhaps it's a cave. Perhaps Krishna has manifested this cave for us to have some special secret pastimes in. And then they thought, shall we enter this? And then some of the boys, Madhumangal, said, no, we shouldn't. He was a little shy. He's a Brahmin, remember. He knows all these things. Because he was aware of this fishy smell. But the other boys, in their enthusiasm, they thought, well, Krishna is here. If there's any problem, Krishna's going to protect us. Because they've already seen Krishna kill Bakasura and Vatsasura. And they've heard of Trinavrata, Shakatasura and Putana. They've understood that he's capable of actually doing this. Even though they don't directly believe that it's Krishna ultimately, but Krishna was doing that pastime. So this is a very interesting point, because Krishna is standing right back and just astonished at this personality of Aghasura on the track. And he's thinking to himself, he knows, of course, this is a demon, Aghasura, and he wants to check the boys entering into the mouth of Aghasura. And it's described that Krishna's Sankalpa Shakti will always be successful. Whatever he desires must manifest. So his desire is for the boys not to enter into this demon's mouth. But Krishna's Sakhas, they have another desire, that they want to see the heroism again of Krishna. If it is a demon, they're fearless. So it's described that Krishna's Leela Shakti supersedes Krishna's Sankalpa Shakti. That his own Shakti is defeated by his Leela Shakti. And actually it's described that Krishna becomes astonished at the workings of his Leela Shakti. His Leela Shakti has arranged this. And he was actually, he was calling out to the boys, but the boys didn't even hear him. Leela Shakti arranged for them not even to hear. So Krishna's astonished. But then when he starts to contemplate that all those calves also, and all my darling friends, who I am their very life and soul, have entered the belly of this demon, then he became disturbed. And then he himself enters the mouth of Agasura. And it's described, up until this point, Krishna has never broken that boundary of expanding or contracting his body. He's kept himself in all the different demons that he's killed as a very little boy, 5-year-old boy. But in this instance, it's the first time that he actually expands his body to sit in the middle of Agasura's throat, to block up his life air. So then it's described how Agasura, he can't breathe, he's choking to death. There's no opening where he can get out. So that Brahma Rudra in the top of the head, that's where he has to burst out. And it's described that his effulgence is very bright and it's just waiting there. And then Krishna, he casts his glance across all the calves and cowherd boys, and they all come back to life, and they all come out of the dead body of Aghasura, very joyously, understanding that Krishna has actually killed this demon. Again, Krishna has saved them. So how beautiful this relationship is, increasing more and more. With each demon that Krishna kills, this Sakya Ras is increased again and again. But it's not entirely just, as I said previously, Krishna is the hero. Krishna is the loving hero. It's more than that mood. So then when Krishna comes out, this illumination is just hanging in the sky. Meanwhile, and at that time when Krishna actually kills Agasura, because the demigods were so fearful of Agasura, they become overjoyed. And they're showering flowers and blowing conch shells and mridangas and music and so on. And that music reaches beyond Mahaloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka. And then Lord Brahma, he comes immediately to witness this. And Lord Brahma is witness to this effulgence going into the body of Krishna. And he's astonished that he's covered over by Yogamaya. This we'll discuss more extensively tomorrow. We'll discuss this Brahma Vimohan Leela tomorrow. This is a longer Leela. But he's astonished when he sees that effulgence. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is explaining that actually Aghasura attains the state. Just a second. Huh? No, this is the whole point. It's not Sayuja. It's Swarup Mukti. He's liberated directly into Vaikuntha. And normally, you would never see the effulgence of a soul. But Krishna deliberately allowed this effulgence to be witnessed to demonstrate his compassion, that he will give liberation even to the demons. This is how the commentators, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, describes it. He actually attained Swarup Mukti, but it looked like Sayuja Mukti, like you're saying. But actually, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur is saying it's Swarup Mukti. It's like when the effulgence of Shishupal merges into the feet of Krishna in that assembly. But Shishupal, who is he? He's Jai or Vijay in the spirit. So they don't want Sayuja. So again, it's the same parallel. It's that same Swarup Mukti. So this was the destination of Agasura. And when, straight after this pastime, after that effulgence has merged into the body of Krishna, then the cowherd boys, they decide after that they have to go and cleanse themselves from the stomach of being, almost drowned in Aghasura. So then they come to a beautiful, beautiful bank of the Jamuna, and it's described how they all take bath in the Jamuna, and then they sit down to have their splendid picnic. And then, of course, Lord Brahma, who has become bewildered by this pastime, then he comes to perform the pastime of stealing the calves and stealing the cowherd boys.
They also played on his body.
Yes. This body existed for a whole year after this, because of course Krishna manifested as all the cowherd boys at this time. So Agasura, his body was purified by the touch of Krishna, just as Putana's body was purified by the touch of Krishna. So all its bad smell and so on had gone. And then it just became an amazing playhouse for the Sakas to actually, enjoy their pastimes, their games. Green Park, yeah. Theme park, yeah. So they were really relishing this, his body. And because of that relish of his body, Aghasura, it's described, got so much credits because his body was supporting Krishna's pastimes at that point, because the cowherd boys were getting so much pleasure from playing within his, body. So that's the end of that pastime. And it's described at the end here because this pastime is being described to the Brijbasis 12 months later. So Parikshit Maharaj, he's inquiring to Shukadev Goswami, how is it possible that things done in the past, in the Kumara age, are described as being done in his Poganda age? Because the Brahma Vimohan, he's in Poganda. And is it Yoga Maya? Has Yoga Maya orchestrated this? So it's described that Parikshit demonstrates his Guru Nishta to Shukadev by inquiring like this. And when Shukadev Goswami hears this question, he actually loses consciousness in ecstasy, thinking about all of Krishna's pastimes. This is how Srila Vishnu Chakravarti describes this. And Narad and Vyas, they have to come and sit beside Shukadev Goswami and loudly chant the holy name to revive him. After many hours, he's actually revived so that he can come back and tell the rest of this 10th canto or these Leelas, the next one, Brahma Vimohan Leela. But this was the result of Shukadev Goswami. It's described he regained consciousness after the loud chanting by Narad, Vyasa and others. So this is the pastime of Aghasura and Bakasura, and we don't have to take them out of Braj in a sense to see them separately from their support of the relationships in Braj between the Brijbasis. Everything that we're talking about really, for me, I'm understanding anyway, is the sweetness of the Brijbasis. It's to get the appreciation of their incredible love for Krishna. So this is the mood that I'm understanding from Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. It's their affection, their deep affection for it's not just some story about a snake that swallowed the boys and then Krishna killed him. It's much, 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 much more than that. It's about the sweetness of the Brijbasis' relationship with this personality. Now it's describing here in the Krishna Samhita that he representing the mentality of cruelty to others and violence and causing trouble to others out of envy. This attitude of offensiveness to chanting Krishna's name leads to this kind of mentality and creates a miserly attitude. So we have to be very cautious in our taking of Nam to endeavor to purify the disease of Nam Aparad and the disease of Nam Abas. It's describing in the Gaga Samhita that Aga was the son of Sankasura. He was proud of his attractive body. One time he saw the Muni Astavakra, who's bent, Asta means 8, he's bent in 8 places. And he laughed and he said, "Who is this ugly person?" The sage cursed him to become the ugliest snake on earth. When Aga fell at his feet and begged for mercy, the sage blessed that he would be delivered and liberated by Sri Krishna himself. So that's his previous identity to getting this mercy of Krishna expanding in his throat and taking his life in that way. So that's the end. Jai. Does anyone have a comment at all? Or a correction? Something? Everyone's quiet today.
Where is that Bakasura where Krishna killed Aghasura?
Bakastali, yes, Bakastali it's called, where Krishna killed Bakasura. There's the place described in Jiva Goswami, in his Gopal Champu. I didn't mention that. Sorry?
There is a lake.
Yes, there's a lake.
Gopinath Swami and Swami were living.
Yes, near a lake. Bakastala.
If you go to on the road to Delhi, then there is another place you can turn to go to Govardhan.
Yes.
Then
There's 2 roads actually. There's 2
One
roads.
is Chatikara, the other one is through Chata.
And there's a 3rd road also. There's actually 2 alternatives. You can go through Varshana and Nandagram to reach there, or you can come through the back of Nandagram. Through there. So it's in that area. So when they were in Vasant, they went off to the right, towards the forest of Kamyavan. Even though the wagon train, so to speak, was going to head ultimately around the other way to Puchuri, etc., to get to Varshana and Nandagam. But you're describing it as being...
it's not far from Varshana. If you go through the field nowadays, not that way.
Really? So Varshana, just behind Varshana, of course, is Kamyavan, where Mother Yashoda is from. So that forest is there. So they didn't go that far. But we have to remember, hearing all these different pastimes, it's good to hear the numbers of calves, because how much grass would they need? How much extensive walking around would they have to do? Very beautiful how Krishna had this pastime of tending the calves.
Say also that Nanda Maharaj's camp was in Chatikara.
Chatikari, yes.
But Vrishabhanu Maharaj was in Rad. His camp was in Rad. Rad is actually was the camp of Radharani family and Chatikara of Krishna.
That's interesting. I was thinking it was the same, that they were together in their traveling. They were more or less
together, but they were big.
Yeah, they had to have their space. Yeah.
Like in Harad and in Gokul.
Yes. Yeah, nice. Did you all understand what he was saying? In Ral, it was the place of Brishbhanu Maharaj, but in Chatikara was the place of Nanda Baba. But they only stayed in those places for a limited amount of time, a matter of months, and then they would gradually move. But he's giving the understanding that, of course, Vrishabhanu Maharaj would always have his camp a little bit separate, because they were so big in each. They were both kings, Vrishabhanu Maharaj, and Nanda Baba, they were both their own independent kings like that, so they had their own places.
Maharaj had more cows than Nanda Baba.
Did he?
Yes. Nanda Baba had 9 lakhs, Vrindavan Maharaj had 11 lakhs.
Aha. Aha.
There's also a description in Chaitanya Charitamrita where some of the cow boys are given numbers of cows that we can't even figure it out. It's like a padma in Sanskrit equals quadrillion times another million or something billion. So it's unlimited cows.
Yeah. And even Krishna knows all the names of all the cows. There's not a single cow that he doesn't know. When he's sitting in the tree in Terkadamba and he's counting them all on his jeweled necklace, and there's a whole description by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur of the 108 different types of cows. Some have mridanga heads, some are brown, some have one dark eye, some are black, some are white. And he describes, I can't remember now, I don't have my notes of that, but he describes extensively all the different types of cows in great detail, the different numbers, and they're all in these different groups, and then within each group there's like a leader of each group, just like there is with the gopis, and then they all have their names. And Krishna, when he plays his flute, I forgot to say that, at this point Krishna's really starting to practice on his flute. Because he realizes that Gurudev used to explain to us, why did Krishna play the flute? Because the sound could go anywhere. There was no obstruction. It could go in the ladies' quarters anywhere it wanted to go. It was completely unbounded. And he thought also, simultaneously, that Baladev was very big and strong. How am I going to get any relationship with these gopis when Baladev, my brother, is so beautiful? I must develop this, talent of being a good flute player. So these two incentives, And at this point, Krishna's flute playing was becoming really famous. At this point, when he's only 5 years old, he hasn't even come to Boganda. Boganda is in the Brahma Vimohan Leela. So, and his flute, Mother Yashoda gets him many flutes, but this is actually I can remember one time, maybe Vrindavan Vilasini was there. We went to Charan Pahari. Which one was it? On the way to Kamyavan, I think, there's a big chant. We have to walk up those big steps.
Oh, up the mountain.
Up the mountain, yeah. And at the bottom of there, Gurudev sat with us and he started to describe the sound of Krishna's flute. Do you remember that? And he was describing it going like in waves, like that. He said, "Do you know the sound of Krishna's flute?" It was just a bunch of very new Western devotees. Maybe Maharaj was there also. And we were sitting there and Gurudev started to describe the sound of Krishna's flute. Just going like in these undulating waves of sweetness, just penetrating anywhere. We can't imagine the blissful. We can sometimes hear some incredible music, but what to speak of the sound of Krishna's flute? This is like more than even Kishori Mohan can demonstrate for us, So.
They got free from qualities.
From what?
From the qualities of those demons.
But all the Brijabasis are completely Nitya, Siddha, Parikas. They're all coming from Goloka Vrindavan. So Nitya, Siddha means eternally perfect. So sadhana siddhas. Those are described amongst the gopis that I read about. I hadn't heard of the sadhana siddha sakas, but there must be sadhana siddha sakas too.
It's a different line.
Yeah. I don't know that, what you're saying. All I've considered always is that they're perfect individuals, but they're covered by Yoga Maya, so it might be reconciled by this, what you've heard. Because of that covering of Yoga Maya, perhaps they imagine that they have some lower qualities that need purification. But for us, we have the Acharya, particularly Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who brings this aspect out. But in the 10th canto, it's not really focused on very much. what those anartas represent. It's actually not focused at all. They just describe the utter sweetness of this madhurya. That's the only description that is there. But it's interesting. But for us listening, and we hear what it represents, for us conditioned souls, then we should endeavor to take shelter of that pastime in order to purify whatever anartha we feel is applicable.
In regards to the geography of Vrindavan, because it's very fascinating, but also there's the Achincha Shakti, as we know, that makes Vrindavan expand and
Yes.
according to the Leela.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yes.
Even though they don't understand this is happening.
Yes.
But Vrindavan is expanding
Yes.
by religion.
I mentioned that actually. It's actually 84 kroshas, right? 84 square miles. But sometimes Krishna wants to get somewhere in a hurry, and immediately it contracts, and just one step and he's there. But it's described, the number of pastimes that we don't hear about. There's one great personality called Narayan Bhatta Goswami. Gurudev used to quote him many times. And he's written about 60,000 pastimes in Braj. And Gurudev said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Gurudev used to say that every single step that Krishna made was a pastime. Every step he took was... And of course the Goswamis would sleep under a different tree every night to hear all those different pastimes and leelas. Yes, absolutely. So this dynamic has to be very much appreciated. And constantly, just as I've described before, our practice, our sadhana bhajan, must be ever fresh. We can't be just hanging on whatever, we had previously imagined to have attained. We don't feel as a bhakta that we have attained anything, really. That mood of humility has to be there to make it go forward. I've often described like a musician. If a musician plays something really fantastic and he keeps on thinking, well, this is fantastic, he's not going to go any further. But if he actually thinks, well, that's not that crash hot, I can do a bit better than that. That mood of humility, if you meet real musicians, they're always the most humble people, really, if they've really understood that growth. So in similar.
One time I was talking to Gurudev and he asked me how I was. And I said, well, I'm okay, but not really satisfied. And he said, but that's natural. Even Radharani has it. She never feels satisfied. And that's the most humility she has.
When Gurudev was describing that one time also, he said, just like me, I am never satisfied that I am fulfilling my Gurudev's desire for me. I'm never satisfied that I'm able to repay my Gurudev for what he gave me. And we saw our Gurudev 365 days of the year working out. Every day was a festival, wherever he was. Padmanabha Maharaj would have seen the most. In any situation when there was practically not even many devotees, Gurudev would call them and have some type of katha, some type of writing so much, etc. There was never a moment that we witnessed when he wasn't utterly engaged and he didn't feel satisfied that he was doing enough. So when I think of that, I almost feel helpless. I take my rest, I take my sleep, I do all kinds of, chilling out things, and I'm not running, how unfortunate am I? Srila Gurudev ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Ananta Kota Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Gold Pregnancy. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna. Jaya Giri Raja Jaya Govardhana, Giri Raja Jaya Govardhana. Oh Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari, Sachinandan Jaya Gaura Hari. Aghasura hey, Aghasura hey, Aghasura hey, Aghasura hey. Oh Jaya Radha, Gopinath Radha, Gopinath Radha. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Shri Radhe. Jaya Vrishabhanu Nandini Radhe Radhe, Vrishabhanu Nandini Radhe Radhe. Radhe 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 Radhe. Go. Shri Gurudev ki jai, Rupanuga Guru Varigya ki jai, Giriraj Govardhan ki jai, Sachinandana Gaura Hari ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Ju ki jai, Srimati Radharani Brajeshwari Vrishabhanu Nandini ki jai, Shri Vaishnavas ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol, Vanshakaupa Trubhyascha, Kripa Sindhavescha, Patitanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha. Basanti, you're going to remember the calendar?